There are very few things in the world that are better than a really, really great book. A really great book is kind of like learning from someone who's had 10 or 20 or 50 or even more years of experience than you, and understanding what they did to get through the challenges that you're going to face along your journey as a marketer or as a business owner, figuring out the same things that they figured out, but in like a fraction of the time, and learning the kind of skills and competencies that will help you get more successful more quickly by being able to push through obstacles. I think Charlie Munger put it best. Warren Buffett's right-hand man, who passed away recently, if you didn't know, he put it best when he said, those who keep learning keep rising. And in the world of marketing and business and selling stuff on the internet, holy smokes, that is definitely true, because as you probably are well aware by now, things are changing really quickly in our world. So with that said, I wanted to run through 8 books. I've got them right here in front of me. 8 books that will make you a better marketer, 8 books that will make you a better business owner, and 8 books that will help you turn more strangers into happy customers. Now, these are should read books. These are not must read books. There are a list of 10 books that I've got in front of me, which I'm going to give you in just a second, that are kind of like the essentials. These are the famous books that everyone has probably heard of before, like the Ogilvy on advertising, or really any of Ogilvy's books, the Wizard of Ads trilogy. There's Robert Cialdini's book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. What else have we got here? There's Scientific Advertising by Claude Hopkins, The Ultimate Sales Letter by Dan Kennedy, Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. I think I mentioned that one. Alchemy by Rory Sutherland, The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, Never Lose a Customer Again by Joey Coleman, and Deep Work by Cal Newport. Everyone kind of knows these books. They're pretty well known. These are things that you really must read in order to get good. And I've got an honorable shout out here that I want to give to The One Thing by Gary Keller, pretty much anything written by Simon Sinek, Blue Ocean Strategy, and Alex Hormozy's hopefully growing very quickly series of $100 million books. But if those are like the everyone knows about these, you must read them books, I want to share my 8 books that very few people know about, don't get talked about a whole lot, but that you really should read so you can get better at this game of marketing. We're going to start out this list by talking about things that help you understand your customers and why they buy the things that they do and why they buy the way that they do. And then we're going to go down the rabbit hole of talking about how do you get better at the tactics and the strategies of marketing and the tactics and strategies of business. So let's kick things off with book number 1. Grab yourself a drink if you don't have one yet. Here it is. I'm not going to butcher the author's name here. It's been too long since I studied French. But this book, The Culture Code, really fascinating insight and exploration into what do products of different types mean to people when they buy them. So the author here is a researcher. He does a whole lot of like customer research and market research and product research, and he interviews people and all these sorts of things, and he brings those findings in the book to us, and he talks about here's what particular products and what particular industries, if you will, mean to consumers. So the easiest example, and probably one of the most powerful examples from the book, is anyone's first car. Now, when people buy their first car, they're not buying a car, they're not buying a faster or more pleasurable way to get from A to B than walking or catching the train or getting a bus or anything like that. When people buy their first car, they're actually buying freedom. That is the culture code, which is his way of sort of describing what a product means to someone. That is the culture code of the first car. When people buy that, they are buying freedom. Now, other examples of culture codes that he talks about throughout the book, and he goes through a whole bunch of different industries and different types of products throughout this. It might take a while to get to stuff that's really relevant to you, but when you do get there, it's going to be very powerful. He talks about money. The culture code of money is not, again, freedom. It's not choices. It's not power. It's none of that sort of stuff. Money, at least in America, which is where this kind of book is written for, money is proof. Money is proof to ourselves and also to the world that we have value, that we do good things that other people want a part of. So money is proof. Another example from the book, health. And this is kind of where I started my career. So this is one that really sticks out to me. Health is activity. So if we have more health, that means we can do more stuff. We can work harder. We can work kind of with greater levels of intensity because we don't have brain fog or what have you. We can do more exciting stuff on the weekends. We can read more books. We can start more hobbies. Health is activity. And the lack of health, of course, is immobility, for want of a better term. It is a lack of movement. So when we think about health, when we buy things that are related to health, we're really purchasing a greater level of activity in our lives. Now, go read this book. He's going to go through your industry, and there are, of course, too many for me to mention here, and really think about what does my product, what does my service represent to my audience? And when I talk about it, when I make my offer to my audience, am I mentioning those things or am I completely forgetting them? So that's book number one. Now, book number two, we gave him a shout out earlier, is the fantastic Dollars and Cents by Dan Ariely. My God, Dan Ariely is such a good thinker. He's an amazing guy, predictably irrational, which I mentioned earlier in this video. Such an insanely good book about how weird our brains are when we make decisions, when we look at stuff and consider, should I buy this? Should I not buy this? But Dollars and Cents really goes into the psychology of how do people spend their money, because there are a lot of ways that we do that. We spend our money on things that we enjoy buying. We spend our money on things that we know we should not be buying. We spend our money on things that we don't want, that we're not going to look forward to using or having, but we kind of really need to have. For example, insurance. No one enjoys buying insurance, as an example. And he talks a lot around the resistance that the buying process can have. So if we pay for something up front and we consume it immediately, how is that different to paying for something in installments and consuming it immediately? How is that different to paying for something right now and then consuming it later? And if you understand how people's brains work, how we go about the buying process, how spending money feels to your consumer, then you can make it less frictional and more enjoyable for them to actually buy the specific nature of whatever it is that you sell, whether it's something that they want, but they know they shouldn't have, something that they know that they need, something that they don't want to buy, something that they're not going to enjoy using, whatever it is that you've got. Dan talks about, here's how your audience's brain sees and reflects upon that particular offer that you've got. Now, the third book that we've got in our list here, this is 50% a book for you as a digital marketer and 50% a book for you to understand your audience, is Life Unlocked by Dr. Srini Pillai, who is this guy. I have interviewed him before. Unbelievable thinker about the brain. This book is so incredible. It talks about the 7 lessons that we need to kind of really get our heads around for us to achieve our potential. And this is important to know first and foremost because it's going to allow you to push yourself harder in your work. But secondly, it's going to address something that probably everyone in your audience faces when they look at your offer, which is some kind of resistance. Now, when people think about products, when people think about services, when people think about the culture code of what your product represents, to go back to the example from earlier, they're going to have natural objections. It's totally normal and totally understandable for people to maybe dread using your product or to worry about, if I use this, am I going to be able to succeed? Are people just like me able to use this thing to get the kind of results that you promise? They might have fear of failure. They might have, what are some other things that I listed out here? I got a bunch of notes in front of me. They might have fear of failure. They might have fear of the unknown. They might have fear of threat or fear of stress. And if you can help them prior to making your offer with your content marketing or your marketing campaigns or your emails or what have you, deal with those natural objections. When they come to look at your offer, they're not going to be wondering, is this going to work for people like me? Is this going to work for people? Is this going to, is this change that I'm about to go through really as scary as I think it's going to be? Am I going to be stressed out while I use this product or while I'm going through this transformation? Answering those objections that people normally have, and there are 7 of them, and I guarantee you at least a couple of them are going to apply to your audience. That's going to really help your offers to convert a whole lot better. So special shout out as well to Dr. Pillai's other book, Tinker, Dabble, Doodle, Try, also known as, depending on what country you're in, Think Less, Learn More is the other headline for that book. That one talks about the nature of doing work that's kind of really mentally taxing. So marketing is mentally taxing. It's not like doing simple math or, data entry or anything like that. And he talks about the different ways that we can use our brain and how constantly concentrating makes it harder for us to do work that requires high level concentration. So there's really two books in one here, Life Unlocked and also Tinker Dabble Doodle Try or Think Less, Learn More. Those two are definitely worth your while. Next book on our list, number 4, How to Grow Your Small Business by Donald Miller. Really cracking book. Donald Miller is brilliant. He also wrote Building a Story Brand, which I've got somewhere behind me. Another really good book. But this one's all about how do you get a small business and grow it when there's so much stuff that needs to be addressed along the way. So you've got marketing, you've got sales, you've got leadership, you've got operations, you've got cash flow, and he likens all these different things perfectly. He does this so beautifully in his book. He likens them all to a plane. Now, a plane needs to be balanced. It needs to have wings. It needs to have a pilot in the cockpit. It needs to have fuel tanks. It needs to have thrust. So that's one engine, which might be marketing, or it needs to have 2 engines, which might be marketing and sales. And he talks about when you're growing the business, how do you go through the process of getting the engines and the wings and the fuel tanks and the body and the cockpit to all kind of grow at the same time when they're supposed to, in the order that they should be, so you can make the plane go as fast as humanly possible. And he gives a lot of really good examples about how people make, I think one graphic that I've got in my head from in the book is he talks about businesses that are blimps rather than fighter jets. So blimps, really, really ridiculously slow. They hardly have any thrust. They don't really have wings. They're just sort of like this huge body of operations and systems and whatnot, and basically a pilot driving it. But they can't achieve too much because they don't focus enough on marketing and sales, and they don't really think about the quality of their product, which is, of course, the wings. And because of that, they just sort of bloat out. They never really go anywhere, and they're unable to go to the places that the business owner or the marketer is trying to drive it. So How to Grow Your Small Business by Donald Miller. There's some really, really tactical stuff in there. There is one section in the middle of the book that I remember as well. The whole book is black and white, but then there's a section in the middle that is like 30 pages maybe of glossy pages, and they're written out in color. And he basically breaks down, as well as I've ever seen anyone do it, here is exactly what you should say when you're making your offer to your audience. And he covers a lot of the things that we've already spoken about inside this video about your audience's natural objections, how they think about your product rather than just being a product as like a tool for transformation. And it, like, that 20 pages alone inside the middle of the book when he talks about selling your offer, that's worth at least twice what the book is. That was absolutely fantastic, that section. So How to Build Your Small Business by Donald Miller, highly recommend that one. Next book on our list is Flip the Script by Oren Klaff. Now, I have interviewed Oren, who's a legendary sort of sales pitching teacher. He doesn't necessarily work in the marketing world. I believe, from what I remember, he's kind of in the venture capital, like selling business ideas, selling businesses sort of world. Unbelievable thinker in this space. I had so much fun when I interviewed him on a really old podcast about his book, Pitch Anything. And Flip the Script is sort of a really good follow-up to Pitch Anything, where, well, you know what? If I could summarize this entire book down into one single sentence, it would be this: your audience, the people who you want to turn into customers, are way more likely to believe ideas that come from their brain that they thought of themselves, rather than ideas that you give them. And Flip the Script is all about how to, it's kind of like Inception. How do you put ideas that are going to help your customers and help them want your product? How do you put those ideas into their brain? And he's got a couple of really useful tools. I wrote a couple of them down here. Really useful tools like the tip-off. That was one of my favorite parts of this book, which is basically something that you do conversationally in your offer, in your pitch, if you will, that just demonstrates to everyone listening to you, like, hey, this is a trustworthy authority. This is someone who I genuinely should be listening to. I should be paying very close attention to this offer because the kind of transformation that I'm looking for, this person has exactly the tools, exactly the product, exactly the service that I can use to achieve that particular thing that I want to spend my money on. So Flip the Script by Oren Klaff and also Pitch Anything, highly recommend. On to number 6. I'm almost certain that you have never heard of this book, The Discipline of Market Leaders by Michael Treacy. So here again, we're sort of balancing between consumer psychology and what do people want to buy, and then like marketing and business strategy and operations and tactics and what have you. This is a really good exploration on the different types of products that people could purchase. So if you think about really anything, like when it comes to money, people can buy books on how to invest better and how to save better. They can buy coaching. They can buy done for you, like wealth management services. In the fitness space, it's exactly the same. You can buy dumbbells that just sort of sit there and you need to use them yourself. You can buy coaching programs. You can buy yourself a one-on-one trainer. The same thing is true with just about any different industry. There are different levels of what people can buy, and market leaders know their specific discipline. And there are 3. First and foremost, there is operational excellence. So this is just getting really ridiculously good at delivering the product in a specific way. So Amazon is a really cracking example. They're not necessarily cheaper than anywhere else that you can find products on the internet, but because they arrive pretty much within 24 hours, most products on Amazon arrive really quickly. They have operational excellence. Other examples of operational excellence are companies that can sell things way cheaper than anyone else in an industry. And if that's your sort of discipline, if that's what makes your product great, the Michael Treacy is going to teach you how to demonstrate that and how to explain that value to your audience. The other 2 disciplines are, let me pull up my notes, product leadership. So this would be something like Apple or Tesla, or maybe even Facebook's advertising platform. Like no one else has the kind of features of this particular product. Ours is the very, very best. And then the final one is customer intimacy, which is a different type of discipline again, which is if I have this particular issue, if I have this particular problem, or if I'm trying to achieve this particular goal, how well can your business or your offer or your product solve exactly the specific situation that I'm in and help me achieve the very targeted and precise goal that I'm looking for. So if you don't understand what your discipline is and why that might be valuable to different types of consumers and what you should say about your offer and what you should say in your content when you're reaching out to these people, trying to turn them into customers, then you really should focus on this. Do I have an honorable mention here? I don't have an honorable shout out under this category. The next book, though, is Almost Alchemy by Dan Kennedy. So again, Dan gets 2 mentions on this list. I mentioned earlier, one of the must-read books that every marketer and business owner needs to go through is Ultimate Sales Letter. Ultimate Sales Letter, is that the name of it? I believe that's it. But Almost Alchemy, Ultimate Sales Letter. Almost Alchemy is a really good, really insightful book from Dan. And look at this, it looks really expensive. This book is basically Dan going through 20 different ideas or frameworks or strategies, if you will, that you can deploy in your business to make a whole lot more money. One of my favorite sort of thoughts that he shares is the difference between a culture of sales versus a culture of marketing. So a culture of sales is all about what can we do to get the most number of people to buy from us right now. And that's great. Like if you're doing Facebook advertising or if you're doing content marketing and driving people to some kind of funnel through social media or YouTube or posting stuff on, Instagram, LinkedIn, blogging, whatever it might be, focusing on like, how do we get sales from this efforts that we're putting in? That's a good culture to have. But Dan says, and this is one of the most important lessons in marketing, if you want to make a bunch of money, you have to follow up like a mad thing. Having a sales mindset will focus your brain on what can I do to make sales and get money right now. Having a marketing mindset will expand your thinking, and you'll look at all the traffic that you've got, your audience, all the people that you drive to your website, all the leads that you get, all the visits to your sales page, all the people watching your videos and what have you. And you will start to think about less kind of what could I do to make sales today? And all these people that you'll think about, all these people who I have interacted with in my business, why have they not purchased from me yet? And that is a much better perspective and a much better approach to use in your marketing and in your business. I have an honorable shout out here as well for another book that talks about this in great detail. It's called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. But essentially, in Almost Alchemy, Dan talks a lot about the importance of follow-up and understanding that many people in your audience are tomorrow buyers. They're not going to purchase your service or your product or your coaching or whatever it is that you've got the very first time that they see an add to cart button. They're going to need a while to consider the decision, to consider, do I want this product more than what it is that you're charging me for it? To consider the sorts of things that we spoke about when we were talking about Life Unlocked with Dr. Pillai's book, where we were saying, do they have fear of the unknown? Do they have fear of change? Do they have dread? Same things that we were talking about with Dan Ariely's book. Do they want to spend money on this? Do they know that they need to spend money on this, but they're not going to enjoy using it? So follow up. This is something that Dan goes through a lot in this book. Really important to understand that marketing mindset versus that sales mindset. And the final book on the list is The Voltage Effect by John A. List. Again, probably one that you've not heard of before. This book does a great job of diving into, why do some business ideas really take off? What is it about the product or the mission or the particular type of content or the way that the business is presented to the audience that makes them so successful? And why do some other ideas, why do they just never take off? Now, he goes through, I'm not going to go too deep into it because this is a pretty heavy, complex book. And of course, it depends on what particular industry you're in and what product you sell. But he goes through the 5 traits of scalable, successful offers. And I guarantee you, if you've never really done a deep think about how do I position the premise of the idea of my product or the premise and the idea of my business, this is going to help you do a much better job of grabbing your audience's attention, making your idea about what your business is about, what your product is about, what it can do for people, making it more sticky for them. And now that I've said that, I'm starting to think that if you go through these 8 books at whatever pace works for you, you'll become a more well-rounded marketer or business owner who really gets and understands the first principles and the very nature of what's required to get someone who doesn't know anything about your business, doesn't know what your product is or what it does, and turn them into a happy customer. You'll understand, having looked at hey, these are examples of how people think about spending money on different industries. These are examples of why certain ideas of products worked really well and others didn't. These are examples of how focusing on marketing versus focusing on sales in certain businesses worked and why it didn't work for other businesses. You'll kind of expose yourself to a lot more different ideas. And like I said, you will have a better understanding of the first principles of having a small business or working in a small business and doing marketing and doing sales. So those are the 8 plus honorable mentions of every book or every of books that digital marketers and small business owners should read. So I'm wondering, let me know in the comments, are there any that I've missed here? What are some of your favorite books about marketing or entrepreneurship or having a small business that people should read, but they've maybe never heard of? And of course, head on over here, check out some other videos from this channel. Don't forget to click that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.